I remember the night like it was yesterday. It was late and I was driving home from a friend's house. I had taken a wrong turn and ended up on a deserted country road. I was tired and just wanted to get home, but fate had something else in store for me. As I drove down the dark road, I saw a figure in the distance. It was a hitchhiker. I never pick up hitchhikers, but something about this one made me stop. He looked harmless enough, so I rolled down my window and asked him where he was going. The hitchhiker sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, unblinking. I tried to make small talk, but he didn't respond. He just sat there, his eyes fixed ahead, his breathing shallow and controlled. The silence was deafening. I felt like I was driving with a corpse in my passenger seat. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept drifting back to the hitchhiker. Who was he? Where was he going? What was he thinking? As we drove further down the road, I began to notice something strange. The hitchhiker's reflection in the side mirror was distorted. His face was twisted and contorted, his eyes glowing a bright, unnatural green. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, thinking that maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But when I looked back in the mirror, his reflection was back to normal. I shook my head and tried to focus on the road, but my nerves were on edge. The hitchhiker's presence was suffocating, and I just wanted to get him out of my car. But I didn't want to be rude or offend him, so I kept quiet and continued to drive. As we drove deeper into the countryside, I began to feel like we were being watched. The trees on either side of the road seemed to be closing in, and the darkness was all-consuming. I turned up the radio to break the tension, but the static-filled music only added to the eerie atmosphere. Suddenly, the hitchhiker leaned forward, his cold breath sending chills down my spine. Without a word, he reached out and grabbed the radio, turning it off. The silence was back, and it was even more oppressive than before. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to keep my composure. I couldn't wait to get this guy out of my car. But then, something strange happened. The hitchhiker turned to me, his eyes piercing through the darkness. "You shouldn't have picked me up," he said, his voice low and menacing. I felt a jolt of fear shoot through my body. I didn't know what he meant, but I knew it couldn't be good. "What do you mean?" I asked him, my voice barely above a whisper, but he didn't answer. Instead, he just sat there, his eyes fixed on mine. And that's when I noticed how yellow they were. They looked like they were glowing in the dark. My hands were shaking on the wheel as we continued down the dark, twisting road. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the hitchhiker's presence was overwhelming. And then, out of nowhere, he spoke again. "You're not the first one," he said, his voice low and chilling. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart racing. "I've been on this road before," he said, "and I've been picked up by people like you. People who don't know what they're getting themselves into." I didn't know what he meant, but his words sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to ignore him and focus on the road ahead, but my nerves were shot. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the hitchhiker spoke again. "Stop the car," he said. "I need to get out." I was relieved at the thought of him leaving my car, but I didn't want to stop on this dark, deserted road. "Can't you wait until we reach a gas station or something?" I asked. But the hitchhiker was insistent. "Stop the car," he repeated. "Now." I didn't know what to do. I knew that if I stopped the car, I would put myself in danger. But if I didn't, who knows what this guy would do? I weighed my options, and finally I decided to stop. I pulled over to the side of the road and put the car in park. The hitchhiker didn't waste any time. He opened the door and stepped out, but before he closed the door, he leaned in close to me. "You should have never picked me up," he said, his eyes glowing bright green once again. And with that, he slammed the door shut and disappeared into the darkness. I sat there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, just when I thought it was all over, something even more terrifying happened. My car wouldn't start. I sat there in disbelief as my car refused to start. The darkness seemed to close in around me as I realized I was trapped on this deserted road with no help in sight. I tried the key again desperately, but it was no use. A chilling thought crossed my mind. Had the hitchhiker somehow sabotaged my car when he was in here? Was he trying to strand me out here alone and defenseless? Panic rose in my chest as I realized just how vulnerable I was. I locked the doors and scanned the dark woods surrounding me, looking for any sign of the menacing hitchhiker. The shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, playing tricks on my mind. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go except into the woods. As I sat there trying to control my breathing, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just wait here all night for who knows what. So I forced myself to think, if I could get the car started, I could get out of here. Taking a deep breath, I popped the hood and grabbed the flashlight from my glove box. The night pressed in on me as I shined the light at the engine. Nothing looked out of place, but I didn't know much about cars. As I stood there debating my next move, I heard a rustling in the bushes behind me. I whirled around and let out a scream as the flashlight beam illuminated a stray dog nosing around in the bushes. My heart pounded as the adrenaline flooded my system. It was just a dog, not the sinister hitchhiker coming back for me. I leaned against the car and took some deep breaths to calm my ragged nerves. As much as I wanted to get out of there, I couldn't afford to lose my cool. I had to keep trying to get the car started. After collecting myself, I popped the hood again and inspected the engine more thoroughly. The dog wandered off down the road, leaving me alone with the disabled car. As I looked over the engine parts, nothing seemed damaged or loose. Perhaps the problem was electrical. I got back in the driver's seat and tried the key again. The dashboard lights came on, but the engine barely turned over. I tried one more time and suddenly the engine roared to life. I don't know how, but by some miracle it started. I didn't pause to wonder. I immediately threw the car into drive and floored the gas pedal. The tires squealed as I sped down the dark road away from where the hitchhiker had disappeared. As the car hurtled through the night, I checked the rearview mirror nervously. My blood turned to ice as I saw the hitchhiker's glowing eyes staring back at me from the side of the road. How did he get there so fast? He raised his arm and I saw he held a large knife that glinted in the moonlight. I fixed my eyes on the road ahead and pushed the gas pedal to the floor. The car careened around sharp turns as I put more distance between me and that menacing hitchhiker. Somehow I had narrowly escaped whatever sinister fate he had planned for me. But I didn't breathe easy until the first gas station lights appeared in the distance. Civilization at last. I had made it through the terror of that dark country road. Hey everyone, it's me, Tom. I need to share something that happened to me recently. Something that's got my heart pounding every time I think about it. It's about this new tech, the Mind Harvester. Yeah, catchy name, right? But trust me, what I went through was anything but catchy. Let me spill the beans. So there's this place, kind of underground, that rents out these machines. They look like something out of a sci-fi flick, all chrome and wires. The deal is, you sit in this comfy chair, plug yourself in, and you can mine someone else's thoughts, ideas, and imagination. Sounded wild, and curiosity got the better of me. My buddy Dave told me about it and said he tried it, and it was like stepping into a whole new world. You know, a creative goldmine. As a struggling writer, the idea of tapping into someone else's imagination was too tempting to resist. I found myself in this dimly lit room with the hum of machines filling the air. The guy at the counter handed me a waiver. Standard stuff, you know, about not holding them responsible if I lose my marbles or something. I chuckled nervously and signed it. What's the worst that could happen, right? The Mind Harvester looked like a dentist's chair on steroids, with a helmet attached that seemed straight out of a futuristic movie. The tech guy, a dude with thick glasses and messy hair, gave me a rundown of what to expect. He said I'd feel a bit disoriented at first, but it would pass. I strapped in, feeling a bit like I was about to blast off to another dimension. The helmet lowered onto my head, and suddenly, I was in total darkness. No fancy visuals, just pitch black. I remember thinking, is this it? Then, bam! It hit me like a freight train. I wasn't in control anymore. I was in someone else's mind. Colors swirled around me like an artist's palette gone mad. It was beautiful and chaotic, a symphony of thoughts and ideas. For a moment, I forgot I was even in a machine. It was like free-falling through a kaleidoscope of creativity. But then, the colors shifted, turning darker. It was as if I'd stumbled into the back alley of someone's subconscious. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and a cold breeze sent shivers down my spine. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. As I explored deeper, things got weirder. Faces flashed before me, people I didn't recognize. Whispers echoed, words I couldn't quite make out. It was like being at the edge of a crowded room, hearing snippets of conversations that didn't make sense. And that's when it happened. A face distorted and twisted locked eyes with me. It was like looking into the eyes of pure madness. I tried to pull away, but the face followed me, its silent scream echoing in my mind. Panic set in, and I yanked the helmet off. Back in the real world, I was drenched in sweat. The tech guy rushed over, concern written all over his face. "You okay, man?" he asked. I stammered out a weak, "Yeah," but something had changed. I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. It was as if that twisted face had hitched a ride back with me. Days passed and the nightmares started. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, and that twisted face burned into my memory. Shadows lingered in the corners of my room, and whispers filled the silence of the night. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on stress or lack of sleep, but it didn't stop there. Objects moved on their own, a pen rolling off the table, a door creaking open. I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, until I saw her. In the middle of the night, I woke to a figure standing at the foot of my bed. A woman, her features warped and twisted, like she was a character from a horror movie. My heart raced, and I blinked, thinking it was a nightmare. But she was still there, staring at me with empty eyes. I fumbled for the light switch, and when the room lit up, she was gone. I told myself it was just a trick of the shadows, my mind playing games. Days turned into a living nightmare. The twisted face from the mind harvester haunted my every waking moment. I saw it in reflections, in the patterns of the wallpaper, even in the foam on my morning coffee. It was like a virus spreading through my reality. I went back to the place and demanded answers. The tech guy looked at me like I was crazy. "You're the first one to have this kind of reaction," he said. Real comforting, right? He insisted the mind harvester was foolproof, that I must have brought something with me. I was desperate for a solution. I couldn't live like this. The twisted face was driving me to the edge. I decided to confront it, to go back into the machine and find out what it wanted. This time the colors were muted, the air heavy with a sense of dread. I navigated through the chaos, determined to find that face and put an end to this nightmare. The deeper I went, the more distorted everything became. Faces morphed into grotesque masks, and the whispers grew louder. I stumbled upon memories that weren't mine. A dark past, a hidden crime. It was like being trapped in someone else's personal hell. And then I saw her again. The twisted woman from my bedroom. She stood in the center of a nightmarish landscape, surrounded by shadows that seemed alive. Her eyes locked onto mine, and a guttural voice echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't have come back." I tried to retreat, but the shadows closed in. The twisted faces leered at me, and the whispers turned into screams. I felt a pressure in my chest like something was squeezing the life out of me. Panic set in, and I ripped the helmet off. Back in the real world, I collapsed onto the floor. The tech guy rushed over, his voice distant as he called my name. But I wasn't alone. The twisted faces, the shadows, they followed me out of the machine. I see them everywhere now, in the mirror, on the street, in the faces of strangers. The twisted woman visits me every night, standing at the foot of my bed, whispering dark secrets. I can't escape it. It's like the mind harvester opened a door to something beyond our understanding, and I can't close it. So here I am, telling you my story. If you ever hear about the mind harvester, stay far away. Some things are better left untouched. And if you ever see a twisted face in the shadows, know that it might be too late. The line between reality and nightmares is thin, and once you cross it, there's no turning back. At first, I didn't think much of it when folks around town started talking about getting there. Seems everyone was saying it. The clerk at the gas station, the waitresses at the diner, even Father Mike over at St. Mary's. "Won't be long now till we all get there," they'd say with this far-off look like their minds were someplace else. Gave me the heebie-jeebies, if I'm being honest. I asked my buddy Jake if he knew what was up with all this "there" business, but he just grinned and said, "You'll find out soon enough." Then he drove off in his pickup truck and I never saw him again. That was when I started to get really uneasy. Folks were just up and disappearing, not a word to anyone where they went. And those left behind didn't seem concerned one bit. "Mary's gone off to there," they'd say casual-like if you asked about a missing friend or neighbor. "We all get to go real soon." Well, whatever this their place was, I sure didn't want any part of it. The trouble was, the whole dang town kept talking about their morning, noon, and night. The diner only served journey stew and see you there certs. The gas station started selling their shirts and hats instead of beer and cigarettes. It was like everyone had been body snatched and replaced with their zombies. Then one night, I woke up to a weird pulsating glow outside my window. I peeked out the curtains, expecting to see police lights or something, but what I saw turned my blood to ice. There was some kind of swirling purple vortex hovering above the old Miller place at the edge of my soybean field. It was like someone had ripped open another dimension in the sky, and gathered all around it were at least 100 people from town. Store owners, teachers, even the mayor. They didn't seem afraid of that freaky portal in the least. In fact, they were all smiling and chatting like old pals at a neighborhood cookout. Every so often, one of them would hug their neighbors goodbye, then step into the swirling purple light and disappear. I watched, slack-jawed and trembling, as people I'd known my whole life happily sacrificed themselves to that thing. And the rest of the crowd just waved and cheered like they were off on a luxury cruise, not walking to their doom. Well, I'd seen enough. I was getting the heck out of this crazy town before that vortex swallowed us all. I packed a bag, snuck out the back door, and hightailed it to my truck. But when I tried starting the engine, all I got was a sputtering choke. I popped the hood. Someone had ripped out my spark plugs. My hands shook with equal parts fear and anger. There was no getting out of here till I got my truck running again. Just then, I heard shuffling footsteps coming up the driveway. I peeked over the truck bed and saw my neighbors Brent and Susie making their way towards the field and that swirling portal, arm in arm. Brent even carried a big picnic basket. Before I could duck out of sight, Susie caught my eye. She waved cheerfully. "Come join us, won't you? We're all going there tonight," Brent beamed. "We'd love for you to see there with us. You'll never want to leave." I straightened up, desperation making me bold. "I ain't going nowhere near that thing," I yelled. "Y'all have lost your damn minds." Susie and Brent's smiles wavered. They exchanged a look, then started towards me. "You're frightened. We understand," said Susie gently, like she was talking to a spooked animal. "But once you see the light, you'll know everything's wonderful." I took a few steps back. "The only thing getting lit up around here is my truck tail lights when I'm speeding out of this nut house." Brent shook his head. "We can't let you leave, friend. This is your destiny. It's everyone's destiny to go there." Their voices had taken on a chilling new tone. They cornered me against my truck, eyes feverish and vacant. I knew then, nobody was getting out of this town alive tonight. I slugged Brent across the jaw and made a break for the cornfield. Brent and Susie shrieked after me, but I didn't look back. I sprinted through the rows of corn, sharp leaves whipping my face. When I finally stumbled out the other side, I almost smashed right into the swirling vortex. It towered above me now, angry purple currents swirling faster and faster like a tornado. The townsfolk all turned to stare. Their eyes were pure black orbs, faces blank and inhuman. Before I could run again, they started murmuring in weird chanting voices, "There is peace, there is perfection, there is all you'll ever need." Over and over again, surrounding me in a chorus of madness. Their bodies jerked and convulsed in sick mechanical unison. I was hyperventilating, positive I was losing my own mind. Then Susie and Brent burst from the cornstalks and grabbed me in iron grips. "Time to see paradise," Susie growled, her mouth stretching impossibly wide. I screamed and thrashed with all I had, but I was no match for their demonic strength. They dragged me towards that howling vortex, its vacuum trying to suck me in. At the last second, I twisted free from Susie's claw-like hands. Brent's fingers slipped from my shirt and I toppled backwards into the dirt. The breath was crushed from my lungs on impact. Through spotty vision, I saw Susie reach for me again. I rolled just as her long, spindly fingers grazed my neck. She and Brent shrieked in rage. The whole mob closed in, chanting louder. This was it. I was done for. Then suddenly a gunshot split the air. Susie shrieked and collapsed, clutching her leg. More shots popped off, dropping other townsfolk. I glanced back and saw Sheriff Rogers approaching with a shotgun, picking off possessed folk with icy precision. His crusty voice rang out, "Get behind me if you want to live." I scrambled to my feet and dove behind the sheriff, blessed relief flooding me. He kept firing at the mob, but they barely reacted to the bullets ripping through them. They just kept coming, screaming about paradise. I was shaking head to toe. What the hell is happening? Sheriff Rogers grimaced. Ain't got time to explain, son. But we gotta seal up that vortex for good before these demons drag us all to hell. He pulled a strange capsule from his belt and pressed it into my hand. I'll hold him off. You chuck this into the portal eye when I say. Before I could object, he gave me a rough shove and charged into the possessed mob, guns blazing. I just clung to that metal capsule, my last hope of survival. Through the purple haze, I saw the sheriff toss something that exploded in a flash of light when it hit the dirt. A shock grenade, momentarily stunning the mob. "Now!" he bellowed. I reared back and hurled that capsule with all I had. It sailed straight into the center of the vortex, then exploded in a blinding flash. A massive shockwave erupted outward, knocking me flat on my back. I lay dazed for a moment, a shrill ringing in my ears. When I opened my eyes, the angry purple portal was gone. No trace of it except scorched earth. The possessed townsfolk all lay unmoving on the ground. Sheriff Rogers limped over and yanked me to my feet. I swayed there, unable to form words yet. My mind was scrambled eggs. "We don't have long before they wake up," he said gruffly. "I'll explain everything, but right now we need to get you the hell out of here." He didn't have to tell me twice. We jumped in his cruiser and peeled out just as the townsfolk began to stir. Their chilling screams of rage echoed behind us as we sped into the night. I took one last look at the place I'd called home my whole life, now a cursed land I'd likely never see again. Sheriff Rogers reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "I know you're shaken up, son, but trust me, it's better not to know what's there."